Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm Jason Wehrli. Today we have our 2010 to 12 6.7 Cummins 4-inch high flow intake kit. This is a newly released product for the 2010 to 12 model year. First, we'll start out with the big component here on my right is the fabricated aluminum airbox assembly. So you pop the hood on your 10 to 12 Cummins and you'll see the big plastic air intake assembly on the passenger side of the engine bay. This nice CAD designed fabricated sheet metal TIG welded aluminum airbox replaces that factory plastic component and houses a much larger replaceable freer flowing dry air filter. The box sits right in the OEM location using the OEM mounting points and hardware. We've got pins on the bottom side of the airbox that engage into the rubber grommets. So that drops right into place just like the OEM box. We've got an opening on the passenger side of the box to the fender well. And then on the bottom of the box, we also have an enlarged opening for additional airflow to that air filter. That allows that box to flow better than the factory unit by opening up those extra spaces. Another nice feature on our fabricated aluminum box is you've got your easily removable lid. We've got 4 stainless button head Allens, and you can pop that lid off real easy to inspect the air filter or service the air filter. We've got our nice logo riveted on the top there. Those are available to be powder coated in custom colors if you so choose. So moving on from the fabricated aluminum box assembly, which is all laser cut, bent, and welded here in-house. We go to our 4-inch high flow air filter. It is a dry style air filter. These are a replaceable type item. You can clean them a couple times with compressed air, but they're not meant to be washed. We do include our water repellent outerwear filter cover. This really aids in extending the life of that dry filter. It keeps the pleats of the filter from getting packed full of debris and also keeps water from damaging or saturating the filter. So those come standard in all of our kits. The air filter is connected to our nice 14 gauge, 4-inch diameter fabricated intake pipe. So unlike the factory component, which is neck down and crushed in several areas, has a large turbo silencer at the face of the turbocharger, we've got a nice free-flowing aerodynamic, smooth mandrel bend pipe from filter right to turbo. No internal components that are affecting airflow like the stock intake has. As I mentioned, it's made from 14 gauge material, a little heavier than all other intake manufacturers on the market. Less chance of crushing or denting that pipe versus some of the 16 gauge counterparts. We've got the sensor provisions for both intake sensors that will be removed from your factory intake and installed onto the new intake. We've performed a lot of testing when designing our intakes for these trucks, both on the flow bench and on test vehicles, getting those mass airflow sensors positioned in the proper location to not throw engine lights and give optimal performance. This is a bolt-on kit. This can be put on a stock truck. There's no tuning required and no concern for check engine lights. You will notice right there at the perfect angle, we've got a dent in the pipe at the bottom down here. Visible from camera, but when installed in the truck, like so, turbocharger here, intake box here, that dent is not visible. We get a lot of questions about that dent though. That dent is actually purposely placed there for clearance to the oil filter housing. We wanted to strategically place that dent so that it didn't have to be oversized and affect the airflow of the pipe. So it's put in that position right at that size to just give optimal clearance to the oil filter. So that dent is meant to be there, and once the intake pipe is installed, it is not visible. Lastly, on our intake pipe, you will see our nice machined bung down here at the bottom closest to the face of the turbocharger. That is for connection to your factory CCV system, which is what our supplied chunk of hose right here, push lock hose, oil resistant. A lot of other guys out there are using the wrong style hose and the oil will permeate its way through and make a mess of that hose and an oily mess all around it. We include 2 new hose clamps with that push lock style hose. That connects the breather box from the valve cover back to that intake just like factory. again, being emissions compliant and not causing any code or drivability issues. Last component of the kit is our high quality silicone boot, also manufactured here in the USA. This is a 5-ply construction. It is a little bit shorter than a typical intake connection boot. Reason being, we're pretty limited on space where the intake pipe connects to the turbocharger, and that is why we use these worm gear style hose clamps versus a typical T-bolt clamp, which you might see in some other intake kits. T-bolt clamps are notoriously about twice as wide as a worm drive clamp, and with the narrower width boot, the bead roll on the pipe, and the bead roll on the face of the turbocharger, you don't have enough room length there to use a typical style T-bolt clamp. So that's why our Cummins intake kits, you'll see the use of the worm gear style hose clamps. And I will note that it's not standard normal worm gear clamp like you'd get from a hardware store. We use a specific worm gear clamp that has an extended internal ring so that when you're tightening it, the grooves of the worm gear do not dig into the silicone and tear the silicone. Another common failure point of some competitor intakes out there using cheaper hose clamps without that internal stainless liner, and when you tighten the clamp you will ruin that silicone boot. What type of performance gains can you expect to see with the installation of a high flow intake kit? So on a bone stock truck, installation of this style intake kit is not going to net you 20 or 30 horsepower. It's just not going to happen with stock tuning and the stock mass airflow parameters. For noticeable rear wheel horsepower and torque gains, coupling the intake system with performance aftermarket tuning is going to net you a much larger horsepower torque increase versus the stock intake system. The stock intake system, when coupled with performance tuning, becomes a bottleneck and becomes a restriction point for that increased performance tuning. So this is best coupled with performance tuning to get you the most improvement for horsepower. Although just installation of this kit on a stock truck, you will still feel a seat of the pants difference in turbo spool up as the intake does breathe easier versus the OEM component. You're going to hear more turbo noise because our system is manufactured all from aluminum, fabricated aluminum components versus plastic, and we're eliminating that turbo resonator down in the intake pipe. So obviously it looks great under the hood. Pop the hood at your truck shows and events and you definitely got some nice parts to show off. And you're gonna hear that turbo noise from the truck. They sound really good. You hear that turbocharged diesel. But put it on the dyno, don't expect to see any major horsepower increases unless you're coupling it with performance tuning. Last but not least, our powder coat finish. We take great pride here at WCFab in our powder coat quality, all done here in-house in our state-of-the-art facility. This color here is one of our most popular WCFab red. This one, along with gray, black, and white, we keep in stock, ready to ship. If you're in a hurry to get a kit quick, you can choose one of our in-stock colors. Otherwise, we've got hundreds of other colors that you can choose from. So feel free to reach out to anyone here on our sales team if you have any questions. If you've got a local diesel shop, feel free to reach out to them and see if they offer WCFab product. You can go to our website to our dealer tab page and see what dealer is closest to you. And that wraps up our 10 to 12 Cummins high flow intake kit. Thanks a lot for watching.